Hey, everybody, what is going on? Want to welcome you to this Friday edition, Roto Grinders Daily Fantasy Fix podcast. It is presented to you by our friends over at FanDuel, and I am Dan Bach, of course. And we got a busy show for you today. A lot of stuff to talk about, some industry news, and then obviously a big night in daily fantasy baseball and daily fantasy basketball kicking off this weekend for the playoffs. And, we've got salaries to look at, so we're going to get to all that stuff here in just a moment. Do want to thank our sponsor, FanDuel. Make sure you check them out if you haven't done so already. Again, they got their games posted for the NBA, and it's really a fun game this time of year because I know the last couple of weeks we've been a little bit, I don't know the best term to use, but it's difficult to play for sure when you have injuries and you've got people resting and you've got people tanking. But the playoffs a totally different animal, and we can give you some analysis for that. So you can check that out over on FanDuel as well. I am crossing my fingers and hoping that this is the weekend that FanDuel makes some changes with their scoring. I don't know what to do, to be honest with you, for Major League Baseball. Like, I really don't know. Like, it's been a week since I went on a rant. We have a 9-page a 9-page thread on Roto Grinders about it. And even though I'm like 99% sure that they're working on it behind the scenes, there's been no even public acknowledgement by FanDuel of that there's an issue, we're working on it, or anything along those lines. And it's like we've been down this road before with them, with DraftKings, pretty much any site out there, is that you need to be more open with the community, with your players, and let people know what's going on. I mean, I've been tweeting out stuff before about it. It was CBS in their bracket games that their bracket reveal that they basically acknowledged, hey, we screwed up last year. It shouldn't take 2 hours to reveal a bracket, and we're going to fix it. And, that kind of thing needs to be done here as well. The ties are just ridiculous. Everybody sees it, and I'm crossing my fingers that FanDuel will get on this. And I think that they are getting on this, but I wish they would just acknowledge it to their customers, because there's so many people out there who I think are frustrated by this, and they're sitting in the dark and they're drawing assumptions of, oh, FanDuel's not going to do anything about it. FanDuel doesn't care. And I don't think either of those two things are true, but how can you say those people are wrong when we just sit here for over a week's time, and look at, the scoring system that's set up and see how flawed it is. And there's nothing out there. There's nothing from them as a company saying, hey, we're going to do something about this. So I'm crossing my fingers this is the weekend it gets done, and then maybe early next week we get new scoring. But I don't know. I really don't know anymore. But it's frustrating as somebody who's passionate about their product and what they do, and for there to be just such poor communication between, your entire base of players. Because honestly, there is zero, and I will say this again, zero people who can look at this scoring system and be like, yeah, it's great, I don't want it to change. There's nobody saying that. So I realize maybe I'm just assuming that it's an easier switch than it is. But come on, time has passed. Let's make the move. Let's make the fix. Let's make DFS better this MLB season on FanDuel. So I'm crossing my fingers that it's happening. Also, the other thing I really need to talk about industry news-wise, congressional hearings. David Purdom over at ESPN posted a story yesterday basically saying that I believe it's May the 11th that we're going to see congressional hearings about daily fantasy, sports betting, and basically, those are the main topics to be discussed during this. And I think that some people are wondering, like, is this a good thing or a bad thing? And I don't pretend to be an expert when it comes to congressional hearings or what comes of congressional hearings, but I am a pretty good observer in terms of looking at who's involved and what agenda some people are trying to push. And the guy who's putting this all together is Frank Pallone, who is I believe a congressman or a senator out there in New Jersey, who clearly, New Jersey's trying to get legalized sports betting passed. And let me sit here and say vehemently that, yes, sports betting should absolutely be legalized in this country. There's zero reason why it shouldn't be. But I think what we're seeing here is a situation where somebody like Frank Pallone has an agenda that they want to push, which is sports betting, and they're looping daily fantasy into the conversation and probably going to look at it from the perspective of, hey, you know what? This looks a lot like sports betting. The leagues are in favor of this. So, I think it's time for us to move forward towards, changing the federal law prohibiting sports betting outside of, the couple of states out there. I think that is going to be the dialogue that we get from this. I don't think this is something that's necessarily being done to investigate and in the point of like trying to show like, the evils of daily fantasy sports or the corruption of daily fantasy sports. I don't think that is the purpose of it. I think it's strictly along the lines of, hey, you know what? People like this game. People are playing this game. It's really not hurting anybody. And, let's start the dialogue of, having sports betting in this country. And, some people might think that the daily fantasy industry would be against said thing. I don't believe that's the case whatsoever. I think that ultimately, let's be realistic here. Down the road, if there's legalized online sports betting in this country, I think you could bet your bottom dollar that a lot of these daily fantasy sites would probably offer that alongside of the fantasy games themselves, just simply because there is certainly a crossover market. There is a crossover appeal of it. And let's face it, it's a way to grow your business. And I don't think publicly anybody would ever say said thing, but I think there's zero doubts in my mind that, you certainly have the customer base to offer both of those things. And I think the legal clarity on legalized sports betting obviously kind of takes some of the legal questions that we have currently about whether or not daily fantasy sports is gambling or not gambling, kind of, out of the less of an issue than it is really today. Now, with that said, that doesn't mean that we're just saying, hey, let's legalize sports betting so therefore we don't have to deal with these problems with DFS, because the fact of the matter is this stuff doesn't happen overnight. This is a process that's probably going to take like 3 to 5 years potentially before it happens. Do I think it's going to happen eventually? Yes. But that doesn't mean that in the meantime, that we need to, not continue to push the legal clarity of daily fantasy sports in as many states as we possibly can. And I don't think that is going to slow down anytime soon because of this. But I also don't think that this is really anything that's particularly going to set the industry back. At least I hope not. I don't know. I've kind of been sitting here thinking about it, but I just don't see a situation where that necessarily is going to take place. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Maybe I'm naive about it. But I'll say this much. I'll be grabbing my popcorn, having a front row seat, hopefully on my couch, not out there in Washington, D.C., but who knows? And it'll be interesting to see, what comes of that. But the one worry I have is that a lot of politicians are just not versed on what daily fantasy is. I was going to play back the Harry Reid imaginary players and imaginary games clip today, but I think I'll save the senator some embarrassment of playing that soundbite again. But hopefully, when this takes place, and normally when you've got these situations and these hearings, you would think that the congressmen and women would do research into what they're talking about. But you know what? We've seen some of these hearings on the state level, and a lot of these guys and gals are completely clueless about what we do. So it's going to be interesting, to say the very least. Nothing has been notified in terms of who they're calling, who they're expecting to testify and speak. But I think it's something certainly to keep our eye on, and we'll see what happens coming up next month, May the 11th, literally like right around the corner. So we will see. Okay, that's going to do it in terms of the industry news part of the show. We're going to get into the game analysis, and I said we're because I'm bringing on a good buddy today to talk baseball and NBA with us. You know him from the incentives that he provides, the picks, and also does our roundtable show. Tony Niehaus, Big T. Is it Big T 44? Is that the number you have associated with it?
Hit Big T 44 on some of the sites. It was supposed to be, but some of the sites people already had the name, so I had to add some fours and different things. But yeah, that's the gist of it.
Well, the 44, is that like a basketball number? Because I know you were a baller.
Yeah, that was always my number growing up. So yeah, I've always just put 44 by everything.
All right. So there we go. Big T and I are going to break down this MLB slate, and then we'll get to the NBA as well. And let's start with pitching tonight. Again, we're going to use our FanDuel salaries as our guidance. And tonight's a real good night, I think, because we actually have a pretty good mix of top flight pitchers to choose from. The last couple days hasn't been the most enjoyable, but tonight we do. And then you mix it up with also some teams that are facing some kind of younger, slight gas canish pitchers. And I think we could certainly see a lot of runs scored. So it could be a high-scoring night tonight. But, T, we look at the salaries here for the pitchers. Right off the bat, we see Clayton Kershaw's name on the list, and he's got to be a guy that we look at. But we've got Kershaw, we've got Sale, we've got Bumgarner, Keuchel, and Greinke. Those are all the 5 pitchers over 10K today on FanDuel. Kershaw, is the surest thing on the board, but 12.8 is a big number to pay for. And going against a Giants team who's actually hit the ball pretty well this year, but not the worst, the best opponents so far this season. Which way are you leaning today, starting pitcher-wise?
Yeah, like you said, I mean, it's always got to start with Kershaw, but that price tag is it's tough to look at. I mean, it's way up there. And then you look at it, I mean, against him, Bumgarner, I mean, I was surprised the spread was 170, it looked like, and the total was only 6. So obviously I'd start with even Bumgarner. I mean, on FanDuel, it's a little harder because you need to win, especially now that you get 12 points or whatever for the win. So you need to win. But, I mean, even Bumgarner with the 6-run total. And then you got Greinke, like you said. I mean, the Padres, I watched that game yesterday. They said they've been shut out 5 of their first 10 games, and they had like 47 strikeouts or something in a 3-game series against the Phillies. So, I mean, Greinke's been terrible his first 2 starts, but I almost think Greinke might be the best play of the night just because of how bad the Padres have been.
Yeah, I'm somewhat with you because you bring in the price into consideration there. And he's, clearly you can save, 2,400 from him to Kershaw, and you can do a lot of upgrades with 2,400 across your lineup. My worry with Greinke is a couple things. First off, Vegas not overly excited about maybe even the prospects of Arizona winning. They're only minus 132 here. So you compare that to a Kershaw who's minus 173, given much tougher going against Madison Bumgarner. But I mean, the thing about Kershaw today, for me, that really still makes him a pretty solid cash game is just look at the domination of San Francisco hitters over the years. You're looking at a sample size of 341 at-bats, and he's got almost a 30% K rate. They've only hit 164, an on-base percentage of under 200, a slugging percentage of 214, and again, this is 341 at-bats. This isn't just a 20 or 50 sample size here. 341 and an OPS of 409. And if you break it down individually, you look at like the bad BVP of the day, you might as well just have the entire Giants team. 0 for 9 for Span, 1 for 21 for Crawford, 2 for 40 for Brandon Belt. You go down to Hunter Pence, 5 for 58 against Clayton Kershaw. And I know a lot of people don't hit him very well, but these are bottom of the basement type numbers. And I think he probably keeps it going today. I think it's going to boil down to whether or not we can find enough value to make it work. But boy, I like those 12 points in my cash games. Gives you double-digit strikeout upside. And for me, if Greinke was pitching better, I'd agree with you. But his first 2 starts, T, have been horrendous this year. Just awful.
Yeah, I to be honest, I hate Greinke too, just as far as a pitcher. Like, even last year when he was dominating everybody, I just wasn't a fan of Greinke. I don't know what it is about him, but I mean, and like you said, Kershaw is always going to be the best cash game pitcher just because it just feels good having him in there in your cash games. I mean, all the Giants, it seems like most of their power hitters are lefties. I mean, besides Posey, you got a lot of lefties in that lineup that suit Kershaw really nice for a lot of comfort in your. I mean, especially in cash games, but it's going to be tough to play him in tournaments because you usually need to stack a little bit to win. But I agree with you completely in cash games.
Just to give you a context, Greinke's numbers against Padres have been pretty darn good too. 25% K rate in 165 at-bats, 200 average, and 44 OPS. So he's pretty much dominated San Diego. If there's a spot for him to kind of get back going, this is it. But that number just feels a little low at minus 132. I mean, if I was going to peg this line before today, I probably would have put it at 150. So I feel like I'm 20 points off, which is pretty significant to me. Not that I'm like the ultimate like handicapper or whatnot, but with how bad the Padres have been and how, known of an entity and historically a good pitcher Greinke has been, I expected it to be bigger than it is today. So that's just a little bit of a concern that I have with him. We pretty much glossed over Chris Sale. He's another guy with the K rate is sick. Now, it's smaller sample size and only 56 at-bats against Rays hitters, but 39% in the K rate. He's obviously a guy that you love to use versus lefty-heavy lineups. The Rays don't really have that, though, today. If you kind of project out the way that their lineup's going to look, and potentially might have only one left-handed hitter in it. And obviously Sale, he's good against righties, but he's elite versus lefties. And the fact that he's facing a guy off against Odorizzi, you look at him, only minus 126 as a road favorite. Again, to pay that number, $12K, I think, for him on FanDuel tonight, I need to be more comfortable in him getting a W. I just don't know if we have that here.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of an interesting matchup too, because Sale's probably my favorite pitcher as far as fantasy, just because of his K upside. And Tampa Bay's like always one of my sneaky stack type teams against lefties, just because, like you said, they got all those righties and they just hit lefties good. So I mean, I was kind of shocked when I pulled up Sale's BVP numbers because he's dominated the race. So I'm shocked. Like, he's got 28 strikeouts. I mean, not a huge sample, 64 at bats. But he's got 28 strikeouts, and he's held him to a 172 average. So I'm actually stunned at how good he's been against the Rays. So I might need to give him a little more of a look here, even though, I mean, they're on the road, and Odorizzi's a pretty good pitcher too. So I'm not completely shocked about the line. But, yeah, I need to look at him a little harder than I did before we came on.
Yeah, I think he might be more in play on multiple pitcher sites. I haven't checked the salaries out on DraftKings yet because if you're not as worried about picking up the win, then he's absolutely in play for the reasons we talked about. But on FanDuel, where the win is mightily important and you only get one pitcher, you hate to miss out on those 12 fantasy points right there. So that's kind of my worry with him. Let's move down to the next tier of pitchers. Kind of below 9,000 here. What do you think? Anybody stand out there that you're willing to take a shot on? I mean, even Odorizzi here today, tough to play on FanDuel, of course, because he's going against Sale, but feels underpriced at 7,900 against the White Sox here at home. Guy certainly has double-digit K upside, but again, that matchup versus Sale kind of takes him out of anything but GPP play for me. But anybody there that you like on the lower middle tier, we should say?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite guys really are both underdogs, like you said, so it's tough on FanDuel, but I really like Shields in that same matchup versus Arizona. I mean, the spread, the total is only 6.5, and I just don't love Arizona's bats right now. They haven't really been doing anything. So, I mean, Shields and Odorizzi, I would say, are my favorites, and then kind of a sneaky guy. I mean, if talking on FanDuel where you want to win, is Chen for Miami. It was probably the most shocking line of the day when I was looking at it. I just can't – I mean, Atlanta's not good with the bats, but for Miami to be minus 175 over anybody seems like a pretty big line. So Chen's always been the type of guy that's kind of a crafty type pitcher. So, I mean, he's a guy to look at maybe in that mid to low range.
Yeah, I don't know how much that's on Chen as much as it is the bats for Miami. I mean, Chen is – 8K on FanDuel. I mean, I think I'd consider him if he was like in the 6s range, but 8K is not it's not cheap. It's not a gimme price tag. And he's not a huge strikeout guy. That's my word. You really need the win for him. And even if he's going to get it, I don't know if he gives you enough upside for me to put him in play. But I agree, that line does look a little bit off. And if anything, it might just be like, hey, let's load up on some lefty Miami bats here against Williams Perez, who's really left a lot to be desired against that handedness of bat. The other guy I think some people will talk about today could be Garrett Richards. Minnesota's offense has been terrible this year, and not just that, but they've been striking out at just a ridiculous pace, and we kind of expected this to happen. But I think sooner or later, I don't know if today's the day it's going to happen against Garrett Richards here on the road, at home. But sooner or later, the Minnesota offense is going to break out. I'm not going to play them and predict when it's going to happen, but I don't know if I can necessarily get behind using Garrett Richards here at 8,700 just because I'm a little bit worried that is going to take place here. And the number on him, only minus 122 favorite. The total at 8, which think about this for a second. We got an 8 total between two teams who are like one of the worst offenses we've had so far early this season. If there was ever a game you'd expect it to be at 7, this might have been it. So could be more runs in this one than we come to think. So I'm kind of off of Richards in this one.
Yeah, Minnesota's just been. I mean, every day, like you said, I keep thinking about them breaking out each day, and they're always one of like the sneaky teams to look at, but they just can't hit anything right now. It's painful when you take them, and I mean that's one of the frustrating things being a basketball guy, getting more into baseball is just you have nights where you got all these hitters, and you just know you're going to end with donuts across the board because you take 2-3 bats from Minnesota, and they just have no chance out there.
In terms of the cheapies for us, the one guy I've heard talked about a little bit so far, Joe Ross going on the road at Philadelphia. He is at 7,200. I don't love that play today just because I there's so many good pitchers to pay up for, especially even in tournaments today. I mean, yeah, you're going to differentiate some with the bats, but when you've got more than just one high-dollar pitcher to choose from, you know, it's one thing if it's just Kershaw and then you've got a lot of mediocre guys out there, because if Kershaw doesn't do well at 50% ownership, then you're in a good spot. But, you know, you still have Sale, you still have Bumgarner, Keuchel, potentially. I'm not playing him, but Greinke is a guy who I think is going to be popular tonight. So for that reason, I'm less enthused about kind of paying down for guys. But if I had to pick one, probably would be Joe Ross for me. For Washington going against Jeremy Hellickson, who I don't think is a particularly great pitcher.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, on days like this, on FanDuel especially, where you're only playing one pitcher, I mean, it's going to be hard to win money tonight if you go low, unless it's like it's been where Velasquez goes crazy yesterday or stuff like that. But, I mean, when there's this many aces, I can't see you winning going that low unless your pitcher just goes way above expectations. So, I mean, it's tough. I'd probably look at the upper range too. Another guy to look at maybe is Locke from Pittsburgh, only 5,800, and Milwaukee's been pretty bad with the bats too. But like you said, on FanDuel, it's hard to go low.
All right, let's go to the catcher spot. Thankfully, we don't have Coors Field on this docket. I think they're in Chicago for an early game, so we don't have to worry about that. But give me a couple names here that you like at catcher. I'll give you a few of mine.
Yeah, I mean, a catcher, I always like that Fagley for whatever reason. I mean, I don't know where he'll be at in the lineup against a righty tonight, but when he gets in that right lineup spot, like he's hitting the 2-hole a couple times, that 2,100 catcher's always a price spot that I like to save at, and he's only 2,100. You got Castro, who I always like at 2,400 versus Pelfrey. That's probably my favorite play, actually. It sounds crazy, but Castro was getting that savings at 2,400 to fit some of those top-tier starters in. And Pelfrey is a guy that we like to target. So, I mean, I'd start with those guys, two cheap guys, Castro, Fagley, even Vogt versus Volquez at 2,400. Those would probably be my three guys I got my eye on the most.
Yeah, I think Vogt is certainly in play today against Volquez. You know, 2,400. We love him versus righties. You know, that's the thing about Fagley. I don't know if he's going to be in the lineup today going against the righty. Usually gets in there versus lefties. So for 300 more, you get Vogt in the right-handedness split, which we like. Castro is interesting because I think Houston is I agree with you. I love targeting Pelfrey. He's a guy who is a cheap option for you to fit in with, the Altuves, the Correas, the George Springers out there if you want to stack that game up. But if I'm paying up today, though, I think Jonathan Lucroy is the guy. I know you mentioned Locke, but Lucroy, for his career, has mashed left-handed pitching and actually has a pretty good track record against Lucroy against Locke in his career. So at 3,100, I'm okay with him. It's going to be tough, though, because you're right. I mean, we want to get a Greinke or a Kershaw or a Sale in our lineup. It's hard to pay over $3K for a catcher. So probably going to go with Vogt more than likely, but I think Lucroy is kind of sneaky versus a lefty. Milwaukee's lineup sets up pretty well versus that handedness of pitcher. So I think those are the guys to look at tonight. Maybe Evan Gattis too. He's a guy who obviously has huge power upside. If we're going to pick on Mr. Pelfrey, Gattis could be an option also. So throw him out there. Over to first base tonight. Man, what are you looking at here? I'm looking at these top flight guys. Miggy, Goldie. Chris Davis is okay, but going against the lefty and Perez, probably not the spot for me. I don't. If I'm spending it at pitcher, I don't see spending over $4K for a first baseman today. Don't think I can do it.
Yeah, I mean it's just tough. And then look at that price on Crush Davis today, 4,200 lefty. Like he's it's the highest total of the game at 9, but I don't know how you could possibly pay that with these pitchers on the board. Maybe Poppy versus Dickey. But I'm with you. I gotta go down lower. And the guy that sticks off the page at me is kind of a sleeper type guy, but Justin Bour.
Yep.
Versus Perez, 2,500 on a day where we need savings. I like that power upside. And like you said, Miami, I like that spot a lot. And then at the top of the list right now, Prince Fielder versus Worley. But, God, he's like Minnesota. I take him every day, and he just can't hit the ball right now. So, maybe Bour for me and Fielder right there if I have the guts to take him again.
Yeah, I'm with you on Bour for sure. He was the guy that I was going to say tonight. So I think we're kind of on the same path there in terms of who to potentially go with here today. Yeah, no question about it. Ortiz, BVP is always controversial and not great numbers, but not horrible numbers against R.A. Dickey. I'll look at it a lot more versus knuckleballers than I do the other pitchers out there. But he's probably the best one that they have against him historically. Xander Bogaerts not terrible either, but overall, again, probably not a spot that I'm looking to pay up. Hanley's there as well at first base, but I love Bour. I think he's kind of the way to go today, kind of in that middle to low tier. Potential.
One more guy too in the lower range is Matt Adams. If he's somehow in the lineup, he's only 2,100 versus Melville. So
yeah, I did some research on Mr. Melville here last night, and he was actually his numbers again last year in the AAA was giving up most of the power that he gave up was actually to right-handed bats, not lefties. So it kind of makes me wonder. I don't think Adams is going to play. I think they'll probably go to Moss anyway. And I think the right-handed bats there potentially for St. Louis could be sneaky because I don't think most people are going to dig that deep on it. So like a guy like Grichuk or Holiday in the outfield could be an option. But you're right, Melville, he's not a strikeout guy at all. So if a guy like Adams, who is very strikeout prone, is in a lineup going against a guy who doesn't strike a lot of people out, that's what I kind of look for. And you're right, Min's salary, we'll see if he gets into the lineup today. But I'm with you on Fielder here today. That's kind of it. There's not a whole lot jumping off the page here. You want to get cute. You could go with Albert Pujols. He's actually been productive 3 games in a row, but most of that came down to, not having multi-hit games. He's only had 1 hit in each of those games, but had, 2 RBIs in 2 of them, also a stolen base and pretty good history against Tom Malone. But Again, I don't play a whole lot of Albert Pujols, but sneaky again, highish total there. Maybe this is a spot for him to get going. Okay, second base tonight. I think Altuve is the guy that you want to pay up for if you can get him in your lineup. But again, we're playing Kershaw. You can't really afford $4,400 second baseman today. So other options for us. Not afraid to go to Robinson Cano today at 3,600 against Severino out there in Yankee Stadium. I don't think that's the worst spot on the board today. A guy like Dustin Pedroia, even at 2,900, has hits in, looks like 7 consecutive games. So making a lot of contact at that kind of salary, getting behind him a little bit. Anybody else on the cheap end for you at second?
Second base actually looks pretty loaded tonight with a lot of guys. Like I could see myself playing D. Gordon versus Terrible Perez. Even Dozier versus Richards at 2,900 isn't terrible in the leadoff hole. I always love Odor for whatever reason. I just like him as a player. He's like one of those hustle guys that I just always like having in my lineup. And he even hit in the one hole a few games back versus a bad righty. So that's something to look out for. If he hits in the one hole, I think for sure Odor would be my guy versus Worley. And that's my game I'm targeting tonight, Texas and Baltimore with those 2 gas cans. So as much exposure to that spot as I can get is a good thing. So
I'm with you.
Everything looks good.
Odor's a great play. That is a smart play versus Vance Worley, who's pretty mediocre pitcher in this league. Okay, let's get to third base. Last night, Josh Donaldson donged. I did not have him. Of course, I checked my head-to-head versus Love's bases, and I don't know how he does it. Like, seriously, he had Donaldson last night. I know a lot of people had him, but I had Bautista, who did, squadoosh, really. And then the one thing I looked at, I was like, oh, he used Hamels, and then he used Rickard, opposite of Hamels. And lo and behold, Rickard, of course, has Hamels pitch is okay, but Rickard, of course, has like that RBI double or whatever. I was like, how does this guy do it? He's like GOAT when it comes to DFS baseball. But the Yankees or Toronto tonight, again, I think they'll be a sneaky stack if you wanted to, go that route with a cheap pitcher. But in cash games, that's really not a wise decision in my eyes. But other plays for us here at this position, Adrian Beltre here going against Worley. Not too worried about the righty on righty for him. He's, kind of got hits in 9 of his last 10 games. So he's certainly been seeing the ball pretty well early on this season. Moving down a little bit. Man, what are you seeing here, Tony? I'm struggling here. Derek Dietrich, potentially. There's another lefty for us against Williams Perez, maybe on the cheap.
Yeah, we keep finding those Miami bats to throw in there. And Valbuena, too, versus Pelfrey.
Yes.
Continue that trend, 2,400. And, those are my 2 favorite cheapies. And then, Matt Carpenter, going back to the Melville, he's going to be hitting in the one hole versus, a contact hitter versus a non-strikeout pitcher. You got to like that in DFS. But, like we said, 3,900 is tough to fit in if you're going up to Kershaw, so.
Yeah, I don't think you can play him today just for that reason. I just think it's too difficult to make it fit. Valbuena is the guy, too. I'm glad you're on the show because you're reminding me of the guys I like. He was in my my DFS cycle video for today over on DraftKings, and I love him at 2,400. Good power. And, again, Pelfrey could easily give it up here tonight. Over at shortstop, Correa yesterday, not horrendous, but he didn't give me a homer like Tulo did. But looking at our options again, 4,600. I don't even think I haven't put the lineup together yet, but could we even remotely? Let's see if we go Kershaw, because I really like Correa because I just hate Pelfrey tonight. That puts us at 2,500 apiece. That's awful, man. Like that is really, really awful. So it's pretty tough to go that route tonight. Where are you looking at short?
It's just such an interesting night the more we talk about it because you really want to go Kershaw, but then it's just tough to build a team at that price tag. But, like you said, Correa is about in as good a spot as you could have. 4,600 seems expensive. And with all these aces, he's going to go under-owned, I think. So I think he's a great play. But, Tulo's the guy. If you're going aces, $3K for Tulo. I know he's been bad, but he hit a bomb yesterday. Maybe he gets hot. You got a 9-run total in Boston. It's always pretty good hitters park. So, I mean, Tulo's my guy if I'm going up. I mean, and Elvis Andrus is another guy at 2,800. Back to that Texas-Baltimore matchup I love. But he's in the 8 hole. He usually hits in the 7 or 8 hole, so I don't love that. But I think Tulo or Elvis would be my two guys.
Yeah, I think Tulo is going to be really popular here today because of that salary and the high dollar pitching we have. You can get in the fact that he homered yesterday is going to add on to his ownership. And I don't hate the spot for him at all. There's no question. He could certainly, keep it rolling here in Fenway Park. So I can somewhat get behind that one. Jonathan Villar could be somewhat interesting here. I'll have to check his splits here versus lefties, but usually hitting at the top of that lineup. And again, he's going to be hitting in front of guys like Lucroy and Braun, who are typically, lefty killers for their career. So a guy who might be able to do some damage at the top of that lineup. And if you're really digging for cheap and he's in the lineup today, maybe Jed Jerko here again for the Cardinals going against Melville, a guy who we're not particularly high on tonight.
One more real cheap guy, not to interrupt you, but Stephen Drew, if he's in the lineup, he hit in the 2-hole the other day and hit a dong for me, and he's got that lefty-righty versus Hellickson, so Stephen Drew at 2,300. I like him too.
I'm gonna Ixnay Drew today. That was a really good splits matchup there. Going against what was it, Whistler, I believe that day.
It was against a gas can. I know that.
Yeah. I think it was Whistler. He was just awful. Certainly versus lefties, you could have stacked them all up and done all right. But Hellickson kind of somewhat reverse splits. He's actually been somewhat worse versus righties in his career. So I am. Outside of a stack, which obviously isn't a bad thing to do, I'm probably not going to go that route in terms of I think there's better, cheaper options for us today. Outfield today, Harper, Trout, Stanton, Bautista. And then you got McCutchen, Mookie Betts up at 4,400. So these are all the kind of expensive guys. I think Bautista against Porcello, I don't think you can ignore BVP entirely, especially when it's 10 for 28, 3 home runs, 5 walks, especially only 3 strikeouts and 28 at-bats for a guy who, does miss a lot. That's what I like to see in kind of my BVP as well is, he's not striking out. It's one thing to have a lot of home runs, but if you're missing the ball a good bit, that's going to set you back. But good ballpark and, again, good lineup. So Bats is probably the guy I would pay up for out of these guys. But again, hard to get these 4K guys in if you're playing Kershaw tonight. So he's probably my top high dollar choice. Don't mind me, Ryan Braun at home versus lefties. Again, that's kind of the splits that you're looking for him. Actually, that game's not at home. It's in Pittsburgh. So not as beneficial of a ballpark for him, but still pretty good history versus Locke. Love him versus lefties. Give me some other guys. Who are we looking at outside of, obviously, our Houston Astros potential stack tonight?
Yeah, I mean, on a 14-game slate, you got everybody in play, really. So, I mean, I like all the guys up top a decent amount. But to go to more of a affordable range, if we're going up top at pitcher, I mean, I like all those Texas guys. Back to that game. But Mazzara's been hitting in the 2-hole. He's only 2,700. You got Moreland, who's always got, sneaky upside at 2,700, too. They both get Worley. I mean, I just like to pick on Worley in that matchup. I know I keep talking about it, but I like all those guys, and they're all so cheap that they just fit in nicely with those pitchers. And I mean, even Delino DeShields at 3,300 in the leadoff hole, I don't mind. You got your boy Rickard, who loves bases, boy, 2,600 in the opposite matchup versus Perez. So I like all those guys in that matchup. Preston Tucker versus Pelfrey. I mean, that's an interesting matchup, too, picking on Pelfrey. I mean, there's just a 14-game slate. I mean, there's just value plays everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, there really is. I think this is certainly a spot to save here today. That's why I like, even if you're going to pay for one guy today, going to a guy like Correa at shortstop, I think is better than going to an outfielder. Because you even got a guy like Billy Hamilton here. He did get 2 walks yesterday. I know he got picked off in his first at-bat or his first time on base. But Carlos Martinez, he's a guy who's not a bad pitcher, but certainly a guy who I think Billy Hamilton can steal. And he's only 2,700. So I love that in the leadoff role, not batting ninth. So make sure that he's leading off. We talked about the righties potentially being sneaky for St. Louis tonight. Both Grichuk and Matt Holliday today. And you could even throw Hazelbaker. I think Hazelbaker is actually a lefty, but all three of these outfielders for St. Louis, you've got Hazelbaker 3,100, Holliday 29, and Grichuk at 25. So again, there's lots of value to be had in this outfield spot today. Those are some of the guys that certainly kind of stand out to me. What do you think of your boy Ian Desmond today for Texas as well? Maybe.
I mean, all those Texas guys, they're just so affordable to fit in. I mean, I don't see how I don't build a team in cash, at least with at least 2 or 3 of those guys, just because they're so cheap. And you got the best tournament. I mean, you got the best run exposure of the night. So, I mean, I just don't know how you don't have a couple of those guys in.
Michael Taylor leading off, again, still really cheap out there at, I think, 2,400 over on FanDuel tonight. All right, so that's the quick rundown. Actually, it wasn't too quick, but I think fairly thorough rundown of what we're looking at today in daily fantasy baseball. Let's get to hoops, though. T, this is your deal. We've got a 4-gamer on Saturday. That's what we're going to kind of look at today. And daily fantasy playoff basketball, very different than, what we've seen the last couple of weeks. And even a little bit more different than we see during the regular season, in that we've got more minutes for our marquee players out here, and we don't have to worry about blowouts nearly as much and resting guys in the fourth quarter. So Indiana, Toronto, Houston, Golden State, Boston, Atlanta, and Dallas, Oklahoma City. I know DraftKings is running kind of a big playoff promo as well. So get in. These are going to be fun games. But let's just, before we get into like positional, is it better to go more fair and balanced this time of year than trying to reach for stars and scrubs? What's your thoughts on that?
I mean, last year I did really good in the playoffs by going stars and scrubs. But if you remember, like on FanDuel, they lowered the minimum price down to $2,000 instead of $3,500. So it really was nice for these 2 and 3 game slates because you had more options and you could literally play anybody at 2K. I could play Dan Bach if he's going to get 15 minutes at 2K. Because, even if they get you 7 fantasy points, it lets you fit those stars in. But this year it looks like it's 3,500 at least for these 4-game slates. So I think maybe more fair and balanced would be the way. Without actually diving in full throttle.
Yeah, no, it's going to be interesting to kind of go through this first 4-game slate here. So I actually like starting at the center position. So I want to go there first. And there are really no super studs here. Horford and Howard are your 2 top price guys today. You got Valanciunas, Mahimi, Cantor, Bogut, Adams, and then Jaja, kind of the starters, Kelly Olynyk, Flyer. But getting center right's pretty important here on FanDuel. We only got one of them. You don't want to miss if one guy kind of goes off. What are you looking at here at this position? Because my guy might surprise us a little bit.
It's going to sound crazy for me too, but my favorite guy, I think, just the way I want to build my teams, might be Festus Ezeli. Sounds completely crazy, but he's 3,500. Gives me some savings. I don't love center at all up top. I can't take Horford. I can't take Howard in those. Maybe Howard at 6,900. I just don't think I can do it. Cantor's going to get his minutes limited in the playoffs. He's more of a scrub time player. I could see Bogut, but I just like Ezeli more. I think they're going to use him. He's healthy. I just like Ezeli at 3,500. It seems like the right price for me.
Yeah, you know what? It's interesting because I think it's Bogut for me, believe it or not. We're kind of on the same path here, and you look at his history, certainly versus the Rockets, it's been pretty solid. Had a 43 spot this year, a 20, a 32, a 13 fantasy point game, and then a 37 and a 30. That's his last few years against Houston. I think that he's the guy to go to because I'm with you. I don't see paying up at this position being the smart move. And yeah, Enes Kanter was solid at the end of this year. And in theory, this guy should outperform Bogut, but you just wonder how involved is he really going to be in this game against Dallas. So I actually got Bogut plugged in right now, but I understand your Ezeli, in terms of, kind of purely punting that position. And would you prefer him over Olynyk at 300 more? Because I think there could be some reason to consider Olynyk here for just 300 more over Ezeli.
I just can't do it. I don't know. Atlanta's been the best defensive team, or one of the best defensive teams. I haven't checked the numbers over the last 3 weeks, but I mean they've been really solid on defense. And I mean Olynyk's been good, but I always get worried in the postseason when rotations shrink. I mean I can't see Boston playing 9-10 guys like they have most of the year. They're going to have to limit it. And I just feel like Festus is going to be more of a role in the playoffs. He's just more mobile than Bogut. And I mean, I like Bogut too. I'm for sure using one of those two as of right now. I mean, they're going to need him versus Dwight Howard. I mean, Dwight Howard's going to be more involved in the playoffs too, just when the game slows and stuff like that. But yeah, Bogut or Ezeli would be my two guys right now.
All right, let's get to point guard. And, we've got the upcoming MVP, Steph Curry. We've got Russell Westbrook, the clear-cut two most expensive and, probably top options for us on the board. Do you prefer one or the other, or is it simply, they're both great?
Yeah, I mean, you can't – it's been a debate all year when they play the same day. It's just tough. I mean – I'm going to side with Curry just because it's an extra 17 points on the team total, or not the team total, the game total, where it's 225 and OKC's only 208. So I view them pretty equal. I'll just go with the higher total. And I mean, it's always nice to get Curry when you're going to get at least 30 plus minutes. I mean, even in a blowout, he's going to play 30 plus, which is nice. So. I mean, off the top of my head, I'd say Curry for sure, but obviously you can't go wrong with either one. And it's only a 500 difference in payment, 11-2 and 10-7. So really don't see much of a difference.
Let's frame this a little differently. We've got our over 10K guys: Curry, Westbrook, Harden, Durant, and that's it. Those are our 10K guys. So we've got 4 of them. We could probably fit in 2 today, maybe. Which 2 do you want most out of all the 10K guys?
Out of the 10K guys, I'd probably say Curry and Harden just because I get that correlation. I know Harden. I mean, if I had to choose one, it's going to be Harden just because they're an underdog. And I mean, that guy's going to go down fighting. I mean, I'm not saying Houston's going to win the series, but that guy's going to put up some numbers on Golden State. And, I mean, he's just going to play. Like, he's going to play 40 minutes. So, if I had to choose one, I'm choosing Harden. If I had to choose 2, I'm going Curry and Harden more than likely. And you get that nice correlation in the highest total game.
Yeah, I'm with you on Harden. I'm struggling not putting Durant in just because of position scarcity here today. You look at the other options at the position, and you got, Paul George in a really low-scoring game potentially against Toronto. And then you got Jay Crowder maybe, Ariza maybe, and then it drops off dramatically down to guys like Turner and Barnes and Beasley. There's just not a lot there at the lower levels that interest me. So I think Durant probably going to be a little bit over Curry, especially if I can save 600 there. So I'm actually going to go Harden, Durant, Curry, Westbrook, probably the way that I would rank my 4. Back to point guard, though. I mean, I think that this is a spot to save here a little bit with our second option. I don't really see a roster build of Curry, Westbrook happening. Lowry's going to play a pile of minutes. He's relatively cheap at 8,500, but unless you're going fair and balanced, again, it's hard to put him maybe with a Steph Curry. But I like Pat Beverly today against Golden State. You talked about the total being what it is, and he is more than solidified his role as this key point guard, and he's been really improved offensively, or at least in terms of fantasy-wise, this second half of the season. And we've seen Golden State be picked on at the point guard spot, and that's why I like Pat Beverly today at 5K, one of the few kind of cheaper guys that stands out to me. I like him.
Yeah, Pat Beverly he's a stone lock for me. I mean, unless something changed, I don't know what could possibly change besides like Barea and Felton getting some kind of magical boost or something, but Beverly is as close to a lock as I can find. I mean, I always like him in these emotional games too. Like Houston is not going to just not just going to leave and just take their loss and move on. Guys like Beverly and Harden are going to fight. And I mean, Beverly's another guy that's going to play close to 40 minutes if he doesn't get in foul trouble. And 5K is more than fair for him. So I agree completely. I mean, he's as close to a lock for my team as you can have in all formats too, tournaments, cash games, everything.
Yeah, I think he's just the one kind of 5K sub, 5K or less guy out there that just stands out, like a sore thumb. Like he should, you got to play him when you look at the matchup. So I like him a lot. Any interest in Darren Williams today, 6,200 against Oklahoma City?
I just can't do it. I mean, whatever it is about him, I just can't do it. I mean, maybe if like Barea and Felton were out or something where I know he's going to get a bump, I just can't do it. I mean, I'd rather play those other guys. Even with Williams back, I'd still rather play those other guys at the discount. I mean, I don't love any of them unless one of them's out, but I can't do it at 6,200 especially.
30. Okay, let's go to shooting guard here today. We obviously like James Harden. He's going to be in a lot of lineups tonight. DeMar DeRozan, I looked at his numbers last year in the playoffs. He played like 38 minutes, in those games. He got a ton of run and pretty good history versus Indiana. I don't think he's terrible. It's just hard to get him and Harden together, and we might have some cheaper options below him as well. So take me through shooting guard real quick for you.
I mean, like we said, I mean, I'm for sure going to play Harden and probably one other star. I mean, at least Draymond. So it's tough to fit in DeRozan unless you go like a complete fair and balance, which isn't a terrible idea. But so I'm not really looking at DeRozan a ton. I never really play Klay Thompson. I just don't like him. So then you're talking about guys like Avery Bradley versus Atlanta. And I mean, I don't love that either. So, I mean, you got Wes Matthews, who I expect to actually play big minutes in the playoffs. So I'd say I'd start with him. I mean, he's been playing 40 minutes a night, so he's going to still get 40. He's only 5K. I look at him pretty similarly to Beverly. I mean, he doesn't have as much upside, but for cash games, I really like him a lot. I mean, he's going to get you somewhere in the 20s more than likely, which is fine in my mind for 5K in the playoffs just to build your team. And then another guy right there, Norman Powell, who has been just awesome. I used him the last night of the regular season and just loved him all night. 49 fantasy points that night. I don't know what his role will be in the playoffs, especially with Carroll coming back, but he's a guy to look at depending on what they say about their rotations. I mean, for now, I'd say my guys are Harden and Wes Matthews, but I'd put Norman Powell right there for 4K. Even if you told me he's going to play 20 minutes for 4K, he's the type of guy that gets you nice savings to get those upper guys in.
Yeah, I think Powell is a sneaky tournament option because you said it best. We just don't know his role. And if it's, 25 minutes here, that's great for 4K all day long for his, kind of production. I know the matchup doesn't scream, play me, but Kyle Korver played 38 minutes a game last year in the playoffs. And I think he was obviously a better shooter maybe a year ago, or at least more confident shooter a year ago than we've seen this year. But at a true min salary, I don't think we're going to find guys playing more minutes than him at 3,500, maybe at any position.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to get you minutes, but, oh, man, he's just been – I mean, if you watch Atlanta play, it's like he's just so bad. I don't know what happened to him. He just lost his confidence. And, I mean, not that the last couple of games meant anything except for seeding. I mean, but he still was playing 30 minutes and, like, 5 fantasy points, 8 fantasy points, and 2. Like, oh, my God, he's just so bad.
I think he's that GPP play, though, that where you want to go stars and scrubs. He's a viable scrub to get you 20 fantasy points.
It's just hard, too, because, like, Boston, though, I mean.
Exactly. It's a terrible matchup. Terrible matchup. Yeah, terrible.
My God. I mean, the price is tempting. I agree with you for sure. And I hate shooting guard, which makes it.
Exactly. That's
the position to punt. So.
But the problem is that, like, you talk about Norman Powell, he's like 500 more. And just brings so much more to the table.
So much more. I mean, what if Norman Powell somehow plays 30-plus minutes, and then it's like, oh, man.
Yeah.
I think I would even play Dion Waiters, which sounds crazy, over
That does sound crazy.
Over Corver. I mean, I hate Waiters, but 3,500. His numbers have been relatively good. I mean, he's been playing more minutes because they've been finally resting guys, but he would probably be my 3,500 guy if I had to choose.
All right, let's get to small forward. Durant, I think he's fine here today. I think he's a floor of 40, a ceiling of 60 again as usual. He's going to play pretty much the entire game. Paul George, again, this game in Indiana, it's 195, very low total. They're 6.5-point dogs. Again, fair and balanced lineup. You could throw it out there, but I have tough time putting him in too many of my teams here today. And then we get cheaper. I like Jay Crowder at 58. Pretty good history versus Atlanta this season. I like the salary. He seems to be more healthy now than obviously he was there for a while, and fills up a bunch of categories here. So I like him at 5,800. But I'm having tough time finding where else to go. I mean, Ariza, are you on Ariza today? What do you think?
I mean, Ariza's always been the type of guy that I like, and it's kind of like Beverly. I don't know. I find myself latching onto these Houston guys just because they're all like veteran types, and I think they're going to get up for the matchup, so I don't mind him at all. I mean, him and Crowder are obviously my guys I like right there, but I don't mind Harrison Barnes, who's going to for sure play over 30 minutes. I mean, he has no upside, so I like him in cash games more than tournaments. But 4,800 is fair for him. And I mean, I think my guy so I'd say for cash games, Barnes, but for tournaments, I love Beasley. I mean, the guy can score. I mean, I know you hate him, but I mean, they need scoring to keep up with Golden State. But 4,200, he's got upside.
What happened late in the season? I checked out of basketball, but look at the minutes the last 6 games: 17, 5, 9, 12, 21, 9.
I mean, it doesn't. I checked out too, so I can't say I can even debate.
It's not like they weren't playing for, making the playoffs. Like they were. I mean, they were fighting for their lives, and the guy wasn't on the floor. So that worries me a little bit on the Bees, because I was thinking the same thing. I saw the $4,200 salary. I was like, okay. And then I was like, whoa. These are important games, and the guy was riding the pine. So
yeah, I got to agree with you there. After more I look at it, he's got to be in the doghouse or something, those minutes. I mean, maybe Justin Anderson instead at 3,900. He's worked his way into that rotation in Dallas, so I don't mind him at 39.
Okay, get to power forward here today. You mentioned Draymond Green. Do you love Draymond Green?
Yeah, I mean, if I don't take 2 top-tier guys, he's my guy. And if I can somehow fit a third in, he'd be my third. He's right there on the verge of, like, top 2 or 3 play for me. I mean, he's another guy. I just love targeting these emotional guys getting into the playoffs. I mean, Golden State's going to feel free. They've been battling that record all season. They're finally in the playoffs. It's like a fresh start to them. So I can see them coming out with a lot of energy, and I mean, probably blowing out Houston, even though Houston will score some points. So I love Draymond, and he's got to be the top guy for me, obviously.
Where are you going, under Dirk, 72? I just don't play Dirk. I mean, playoffs, he's going to play more minutes. He's going to score some points, but I just don't love playing him because he's old. But, Sullinger, Ibaka, Turner, Amir. I mean, does Sully get over 30 minutes now that it's playoff time?
I mean, I just have to think Boston limits that rotation a little bit. They just play so many guys, but the problem is you don't know where it's going to come from. And like you said, he doesn't play many minutes, so he always worries me. Maybe for tournaments you get upside with him. He's always got that 30, 40-point upside, but I don't love him. Maybe Miles Turner gets a minute boost going into the playoffs, but he just hasn't done it for me either lately after I rode his coattails for so long this year. So, I mean, I don't love any. I mean, Dirk for cash games, he's not terrible. I'm like you, though. I have an old man rule. I just never play him, except for Kobe in that last game. I had to come out of basketball retirement just for that night to watch him shoot like 75 times. I heard you going on a rant about it, too. You feel the same way I feel.
Yeah, if you listened to XM yesterday, you got a pretty good rant on Kobe from me. There's no doubt about it. Thoughts on Ibaka here? I'm looking at the game log going against Dallas, and again, I'm going to throw out the games where he's not playing a whole lot of minutes, and they haven't been great in 2016. But you look back before that, 34, 27, 44, 36. Not the worst matchup against Dirk Nowitzki. Can he get up for it?
I just can't play Ibaka. Like, he's just been too bad this season, and it's just I don't know. I just can't trust him enough to use him, and he could get up for the playoffs. And I mean, if he looks better to me, maybe I roster him later, but I just can't do it this first time out. I just don't like him. And I mean, Dallas is a better defensive team than people give credit, and Carlisle is easily top 3 or 4 coach in the league. So I think they'll have a nice game plan, and I just don't see much from him.
Any punts here? Is there anywhere to go? I mean, you like Draymond, but didn't give me much else to go to besides.
I think my favorite punt might be Amir Johnson. I like we keep talking about with Boston's rotation. I mean, I like his matchup in this type of game versus Atlanta. They play too big, so I mean, Boston's gonna have to play guys like Amir decent minutes. I haven't looked at his game logs what he did versus Atlanta this year, but for 4,800. Seems like a pretty good play to me. And then if you go lower, maybe like Mo Buckets, 3,500, a blowout type game. I mean, I could see him doing decent. I mean, just as a full punt, just because there's not much up top that we love.
All right, that pretty much covers it. We knocked out the centers to open it up. And again, I know FanDuel, their shot sitting at 175K. They're going to have some really impressive tournaments over there, so certainly check them out if you want to get some interesting daily fantasy playoff action. Again, starts at 12:30 on Saturday. Makes for a day's worth of fun DFS. Tony, thanks so much for jumping in with some analysis for us today, man. I enjoyed it. We'll have to do it again.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's fun to come on the show that got me into DFS to start with. When I was first getting going, I had to listen to you every day and just love the show. So it's fun and an honor to come on with you.
Oh, look at that. Love to hear that. That's exciting. Listener, now contributor. Shows you, boys and girls, you never know what can happen. But we are going to call it a day here, a week for the podcast. We'll be running it back next week, of course. And we invite you to join us, of course, here on Roto Grinders. The best way to get this podcast, subscribe over on iTunes and Stitcher. You'll get access to all of the podcasts that we do, whether it's the one-on-one with Ducky, the morning grind with Stevie. We do a lot of the Grinders live shows, put them in audio-only form. So certainly check that out. Also subscribe to the YouTube page, and then you'll get all of our videos as soon as they are posted. Certainly want to thank Tony for joining me tonight. Grinders Live is rocking here today. We will be taking you all the way up until 7 o'clock. And keep your eye out. Eddie Fear, he is going to be doing a handful of periscopes for you right before roster lock for basketball. So follow us on Twitter, and as soon as he goes live on air, it'll just send the little alert, hey, go check out Eddie Fear taking your questions on NBA before lock. So we're doing that via the periscope pretty much during the playoffs, so check that out as well. But from buddy Tony, I'm Dan. Have yourself a great Friday, and we will see you.